Okay, hello everyone and welcome. Hello to all of you on Zoom. Hi Ramel, if you're in. This is session 3 or 4 now? 3. We're up to session 3. So this is the no waste session on composting, worm farming. We're also going to cover Bokashi. Yep, we've got Steve Batley, who's our landscape architect and permaculture expert. And I'm Julian, I'm the sustainability educator here. This is part of a 10-part series, all about growing big, growing lots of food in small spaces. You can catch previous sessions as we get them onto our YouTube. They're not quite there yet, but they will be shortly. And we're inside today at the outdoor classroom, which is this wonderful passive solar designed place. And the bricks that you see behind us in summer keep it nice and cool, and winter store heat. But also they're all reused bricks, so rather than going off to landfill, they've been reused to build this building. We're at the Randwick Community Centre, which is on Gadigal and Bitchgal land. So I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge any of the Indigenous people who are participating today. Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's get composting.
All right.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, so today's all about composting, worm farming, and another thing called Bokashi, which you may have heard of. But before we get into that, last week, what did we do? Zoomers can call out, or you guys who are here, can you remember what we did last week? Yeah, so sector analysis, zone planning, and seed raising. So the guys here, we did some seed planting last week. Can I show some of your seeds off to the we've all hand sanitized here, so it's all good. So these are, now just let me know, can you guys see, are they showing up? A bit closer. So these are, what type of seeds are these? Dwarf beans. Dwarf beans. So that's a week. That's well and truly on the way. So that's really good. So we made our own mix, our seed raising mix. Here quickly, do you remember the mix? The mix was
1 part coconut fiber and 1 part some sort of sand or something that'll perlite.
Yep, perlite or vermiculite. Yep. And we put a little bit of something else. Yeah, a little bit of compost to get them growing, give them some nutrients.
And Gloria, who's coming in from San Diego,
Hi Gloria,
is asking, did we pre-soak?
Did we pre-soak the seeds?
No.
No, we didn't. We didn't, but I think that can help speed up germination, so get the seeds soaking up the water they need and get them off and running.
I did, like you said, just watered it that day.
Yeah.
And then I didn't water it all week.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
So.
Yeah, and where did you put them?
My windowsill.
Yeah.
Non-direct light.
Yeah.
Yeah, reminds me, but then I put it near the hot water.
Yeah, okay. So somewhere nice and warm, not too much water. So these guys only watered once and that was it. And for beans and peas, that's not a bad option because if you water too much, they go rotten. So they're going really well. We did radishes, I think, as well, and they've germinated for a few of the guys here. So be another couple of weeks. We'll keep an eye on these if you can keep bringing them back in, and then we'll show you how to transplant. So at this point, can I just borrow one of yours?
Yeah.
Just quickly. So these are radishes, is that right? Oh yeah, it says radish on the labelling. That's why labelling is so important. But you can see they're very tall, quite long stems. Do you know what can cause that to happen?
Too much nitrogen?
No.
Looking for light?
Yeah, so that's an indication that they are ready, or they could do with a bit more light, a bit more sunshine. So you could probably with these guys start to move them in a sunnier spot. So when they grow really long and tall like that, yeah, they're looking for light. So I'll just plonk them there for a sec. So that's seed raising. Zone planning. Tell me a little bit about zone planning. What is it? Zoomers? Was anyone here last week on Zoom who'd like to just share your thoughts on, you can either by chat or
yell out.
Yelling out's easier. It's a permaculture tool
So is it it's a guess, is it just planting, you know, where the plant's going to work? Is that zone plant?
Kind of, a little, yeah, but does anyone else want to flesh out that a little bit?
Gloria, would you like to? As a new person, we encourage you to actually talk it out rather than put it on the chat, so that the people in the audience here can know what you're saying as well.
Sebastian here, sort of dividing the area depending on how often we get there and getting things that need attention every day in the closest zone from the house and the household, and then sort of going all the way to basically wide area.
Yep, that's exactly right. So zone 0 is the house, zone 1 is directly around the house, and then you go out according to that, according to how often you visit it or how much energy you spend there. So so most of small spaces are generally zone 1. So we don't have a lot of the bigger kind of further away zones, unless you had a community garden nearby. That could be maybe your zone 1 or 2 as well that you could access. So yeah, that's just sort of a way of thinking about how the land is laid out in patterns. The other thing was sector analysis.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Can I step in here, please? Thank you.
Sure.
I would guess the question I was to understand was the hardness zone. For us in the stateside, it's we have zones from like 1 to 12 maybe, and that's your climate zone. Traditionally, how you harden your plants off, your coastal, inland, more drier or driest, and also your coolness zone. So it all, we pretty much have a set up number. That's what I was understanding what you were saying, but what you're explaining to me now is quite different than interested.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
That's okay. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think in permaculture, it's kind of the zoning concept is it's individual to everyone has their own zoning. So zone 0 is where you live, and then it kind of goes out from there. So it's more of a how often you would visit somewhere, or how much time you would spend somewhere would be closer to the house. And that's where you put the things that you need to visit all the time, like your veggies and your trips and that sort of stuff. So it's just a way of organising yourself and organising the landscape. Sector analysis, I'll just quickly go through, is just identifying those things that are coming into your site and influencing your site, such as
The wind.
the wind, the sun paths, how the sun moves through the sky. So they're really. Did anyone have a look at their sectors during the week? Yeah, everyone's nodding here, saying yes, we did. We looked at that, yeah. So and it just helps you to notice the things that are influencing your space, so you can then respond with your design. All right. Any questions about that last week? No. Okay, let's get on to it. So something you can do in zone 0 and zone 1 and zone 2 and every zone is reusing your nutrients. So permaculture, we know, has a whole range of principles that we can apply to when we're designing and when we're managing systems. One of the principles is a thing called produce no waste. So that one definitely applies to our recycling of nutrients. So composting and turning our kitchen scraps and our garden things, green waste, into a really useful product. So produce no waste is what we're doing today. Another one I thought we could apply to it is the problem is the solution. So permaculture is really good at flipping your thinking on its head and totally looking at things in a different way. So, everyone has stuff that in their kitchen that they don't want to eat and they want to get rid of. What happens if we put your kitchen scraps into the bin, into the general waste bin? It goes to landfill, and what happens once it gets there? Yeah, it turns into methane and toxic sludge, so it's a real problem. But we look at it as a resource, and it's something that we can turn into beautiful, healthy soil for our plants and grow more plants. So we're jumping out of that wasteful problem cycle and turning it into a real useful solution. So a couple of principles that we can apply. So we thought we'd start in zone 0 and then work our way out a little bit from there. So Julian has a Bokashi bin at home, and he's going to talk you through Bokashi, and then we'll move out to outside, just slightly outside. It could also be inside, and look at setting up and managing a worm farm, and then we'll go and look at a compost, setting up and managing a compost.
Okay, so just quickly on the Bokashi. So one of the things I really like about the Bokashi is that, if you come in here, Natalie, it fits under the sink. I'll show you guys. Okay. So Bokashi bin, if you're living in an apartment or somewhere small, what's great about it is it's a completely airtight container. No smell. And you put your veggie scraps and everything like that in there. The one thing that, the downside, because there's lots of upsides, the one downside is that you do have to keep using a Bokashi spray. So it's either a spray like this or it's sprinkles like this. And every time you put some veggie scraps in, you then just put a little sprinkling on top as well. This is what it looks like inside. So it's got a false floor, which goes in the bottom there, which then allows any juices to come out. And you can use the juices diluted, a little bit like you can use worm juices that we'll see outside. The great thing is, completely sealed. It's an airtight seal, because what you're doing is actually pickling the veggie scraps inside. That's also what makes it not turn into a really disgusting smelling mess. What I found is that because you can keep squishing it down and because it's pickling as you're going, you can actually get probably 2 to 3 times the volume into that bucket, because it's sort of decomposing, it's pickling as you go. Then you can dig a hole in the ground, put that much volume into the ground, and I've found that by the time you fill this back up again, everything that was in the ground there a couple of weeks ago is completely turned to soil in a really short amount of time. It's because you've pre-digested it in here. So you don't need, one big advantage, no smell, small space, but also it doesn't require much ground. You know, you don't have to keep finding new holes and spaces to put it. So, and it turns into really rich soil. You could also potentially feed some of this to your worm farm. To give you a sense of cost, this is a 5 litre bag. At the moment, I saw online, it's about $20, and they're saying it'll last about 3 months. You could probably spin it out a bit longer if you wanted to. Yeah.
What can you put in your Bokashi?
Look, they're saying pretty much anything. I would still avoid things like meat and dairy and bread, but it can deal with that. Yeah. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll head out to the lunch.
And what about citrus?
Citrus, yeah. Look, they are saying that you can pretty much put anything in there. Yeah, you know, I guess it depends. You know, I'm not sure that citrus has huge nutritional value compared to, you know, some of your other veggies. So I'd personally keep them out. But, you know, Steve's all about diversity, so a little bit of everything. It's like a multivitamin.
We'll carry this principle with us as well everywhere we go. So.
Julian, how do you know when it's done, and how long does it take to?
Well, depends how long it'll take. You know, that's a length of string question. In that, it depends how long you take to fill that up. As soon as you've filled it, you can put it in the ground. And I reckon for most people, by the time you've filled it back up to the top again, you can put it straight back in the soil again.
Do you need to mince the veggies and then put it in, like chop them really fine?
No, look, that'll speed things up, but
Yeah.
I'm lazy.
Yeah.
Say that again, what's next up?
Oh, sorry, the question was, should you chop up the fruit and veggie scraps before you put them in the Bokashi?
Yeah.
That'd be great. The smaller you make it, the faster it'll go. But I'm lazy and can't be bothered with that sort of thing.
So I guess at the end, when you filled it, basically you're just digging in pretty much fresh produce into the ground.
No, what you're digging into the ground is pickled produce.
But you say you fill it up. So if you just filled it, the last
Well, every day you put some food in, right? Every time you cook a meal, you put some in and you put a little bit of the sprinkles in. So over many days, it'll then be full. Because you're pickling it with this, it'll squish down quite a lot.
So how long do you need to leave it at the end? Because if you don't leave it for any time at the end.
Well, remember the stuff at the very bottom's probably been in there for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So look,
the stuff at the top is virtually fresh. So if you just take it straight away and you're digging in fresh stuff, yeah?
I haven't found that particularly matters.
Okay.
If you've got the time and space, you can absolutely leave it in there to pickle for a while before you put it in the ground. But for me, especially if we're thinking about small spaces, I've only got the one bucket in a cupboard. I don't want to have two in there because it takes up too much room. So I want to empty it so I can keep going. I don't want to have a no-fill time. But you are absolutely right. Those ones at the very top haven't pickled for very long at all.
I think once you put it in the ground, the process keeps going. So it's yeah.
I thought this was going to be my ultimate solution and I could switch off from here, but unfortunately, what I'm after is something that I can put in pot plants and put on top of the.
Yeah, no, it hasn't turned to soil. Yeah. It's a fruit salad of pickle.
Yeah, because we do that anyway. We dig our stuff in, virtually fresh.
Okay, well, this would be better than digging it in fresh because it'll decompose very much quicker in your pots.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
But what you need is a worm farm, so we'll go out and have a look at the worm farm.
Yeah.
Let's go.
We'll head outside and see if the worm farms.
Steve's got his fresh
stinky composting.
Yeah, so Bokashi is Bokashi. Bokashi.
There's a question.
All right. So I've never done Bokashi, but I'd like to give it a crack. I think so we have a system at home. We have the multi-bin system, and this little bin lives under in a drawer, and this is where we put our kitchen compost, kitchen scraps all go in here. Just thinking when Julian was talking, you could have a Bokashi living. This just sits in there, and it gets kind of interestingly fragrant sometimes if we leave it for too long. But if this was a Bokashi bin, it's the same process. You take the lid off, you put your scraps in, but we could actually start the process of this decomposing under the kitchen bench, exactly the same process that we're doing anyway. So we'd be well in advance of what we are at the moment. So even if it's not the finished product that you get from the Bokashi, it's really kick-starting that process of decomposition. But so the other option, you can have a really good option for small spaces on worm farm. Has anyone got a worm farm? Yeah, quite a few people have got worm farms. They're not new; they've been around for a while. How do you guys find them? Is yours going well?
It's new, so I'm still.
It's new, yeah.
About a few weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
Going well.
Except the only thing is I've turned into a communal one, so it's a bit hard to make sure people put the right stuff in there.
Yeah, communal worm farming. That's great.
It works.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's going to keep up with how much vegetable scraps.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Well, mine, I've got this very old system with the tray.
Yep.
And I leave the bottom tray for liquid and stuff, and the middle tray
if I'm going to add carbon stuff, I have it in there.
Yeah.
Otherwise that's the right thing to
Yeah,
do.
look, there's lots of different ways to manage them. I'll take you through the basics of managing a worm farm and starting it off. So where will we start? We'll start with this amazing thing. So this is a cross section of a worm farm. Worm farms come with trays. I don't know if you can see it from this side. Essentially, a worm farm is made up of, well, this version of a worm farm. There's lots of. You could make a worm farm in a bathtub or a box, a styrofoam box. But these ones come with trays, and they come with this bottom tray, which is solid. This is the one that catches any liquid that flows through, and it's got a tap, and you get this beautiful liquid fertilizer that comes off your worm farm. And then inside this tray, you have, normally it comes with a couple of trays like this, which have holes in the bottom. And the holes allow the worms to move up and down, and they allow the liquid to drop through into the bottom. Generally, you'll have 1 or 2 trays stacked up like that. And the most important bit, you have to come with a lid. The lid's really important because worms don't like light. Light actually kills them. So they need dark conditions. So that's the basics of how it's made up. They come with legs as well. When your worm farm is sort of fully going, you'll have the bottom tray has the liquid in it, which is worm juice, which we can use as a fertilizer. The first drop-in tray. So this is a cross-section of a worm farm that's probably a year old. So to get to this stage takes a while. This tray here will have what's called worm castings, which is what your food turns into after it's been through the guts of a worm. Beautiful, beautiful fertilizer. So if you're looking for that good stuff to put on the top of your pot plants, that's the stuff you get there. And this section here is way too much food. So don't do this. All right, this is too much food for your worm farms, unless you've got like a seriously high functioning worm farm, but even then it's probably too much. And I'll talk about why that could be a problem. But essentially, you have a lid, you take the lid off, you put the food in. So that's kind of what you're aiming for, sort of. When you get your worm farm, how to set it up. This is an incomplete system. They come with legs and extra trays, but you just can't keep buying them and setting them up because we'll have too many. But it'll come in a box. You put the legs on, put the first tray in. It'll kind of just sit in like that. I often find that the legs get quite wobbly because worm farms can be quite heavy, so I don't use the legs anyway. I'll stick them on some bricks or something to get them off the ground, just far enough so you can put a bucket or something underneath the tap and catch the liquid. It'll come with a brick of coconut fiber. So last week we used coconut fiber to make our seed raising mix. You can use coconut fiber for what they call the bedding for your worms, and you've probably got some. And it's basically like this, something like this. It's the hairy stuff from the outside of a coconut. Hey. And like our seed raising mix, it holds moisture. I think it's fairly neutral. It's just a really nice place for a worm to live when they first move into your worm farm. So you just moisten the brick. It's a good idea at this stage to put some newspaper over the on the bottom of the tray. That just stops all the worms and the coconut fiber from falling through. Put your coconut fiber sort of like that. And then you got to get some worms. So where do you get worms?
Someone that's got a worm farm with an overabundance of worms. They're really expensive otherwise.
Yeah, they're crazy expensive. So that's the best place is to find someone nice. Permaculture is all about sharing. What's the ethic? Share what's spare. So if you've got a really highly functioning worm farm, you can share some of those worms. So
I was hoping there would be a
Well,
Okay.
I wouldn't say there's an overabundance, but I did find some worms in here. We're gonna use them. Have a look. This is not necessarily what we're aiming for, but this is a fairly well functioning worm farm, given that where it is and how often it gets looked after. So they're fairly, it's going okay. This one's got spiders in it, and you get all sorts of things living in them. Hence the gloves. Spiders are all right. So I think I had a dig before when there were worms. So fingers crossed they're still here. So you can see, we'll talk about feeding them in a little while, but you can see the sort of stuff that goes in here. Here we go. Look at that. A nice batch of worms in there. So there's certain types of worms that will live in your worm farm, not all worms, so you can't necessarily dig worms out of the garden, unfortunately. Some of them will. So these are the worms that will live in a worm farm are the worms that live in the top layer of a soil ecosystem. So where all the mulch is, where all the leaf litter is, that's where they live, because they eat mulch and leaf litter and organic matter. That's why they love our worm farm, because it's full of good stuff. Now, worms hate light. And they hate being touched.
Again already.
Look, I just want to show you one. If I can catch it. I'll try and be quick. So that's a worm. It's I don't know if you can see at this end. It's got a little bit of a. It's got a bit of a thick section, just barely. If you use your imagination, it's got a bit of a thick. So when they're sexually mature, they've got they call it a saddle at one end. So it's a thickening of the, that's basically it's a worm, right? And so worms are, think of a worm like a mucus tube. So they're really moist and gooey. They need moisture and goo around them to survive. This coral worm is not happy. It's getting the salts off my fingers, and it's got the light. So they're like a dark, moist environment. That's where they thrive. So we'll put it back.
Hi, it's Miyoko. I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
So when you talked about the Bokashi, what you are suggesting is basically we use the end product of Bokashi to feed the worm. Is that your suggestion?
Yeah, either feed the worms, or, because it's probably way too much for a worm farm, stick it in the ground, and it'll decompose much faster in the ground after you've Bokashi'd it than if you put them in raw. So I saw your question just then. Yes, it is a sort of partial. It's a pre-digestion method.
That was when you used in the compost, in this little compost bucket. That's when if you sprinkle in a little Bokashi, it'll start the breaking down. You could give that to the worms.
Yeah.
It doesn't sit as long.
Or you could just put it in your compost bin. That gives more area.
Yeah. The thing with Bokashi is it's anaerobic, so it works best if it's completely sealed. Whereas composts tend to be aerobic.
If we use the product of Bokashi as the feeder to worm farm, that sprinkle, does it affect to the function or survival of worms?
I'm not sure. Do you know?
No, I don't think it has any impact on them. In fact, it might be food for them. Because worms don't eat the food, they eat the bacteria that feed on the food.
Yeah, I think Bokashi, don't know, give it a try. Let us know. Let us know how it goes, because I've never had one, so I can't really comment. But I think if you can mix it around. You can do a bit of, you can do a little bit. I would think, my gut feel is if you put too much, if you covered your worm farm in Bokashi goo, the worms might not be really, really happy with that. But I don't know.
Just like if you covered it with too much food.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, we'll take you through the process of looking after it, and then hopefully that'll answer your question. So we find some worms. So you can buy worms in a packet and put it in your worm farm.
Tapeworm.
or you can just get some from a friend.
Where do you buy them from?
Lots, big hardware stores sell them, nurseries, anywhere that sells worm farms generally sell worms, but they're like about $75 for 1,000 worms or something like
I
that.
saw the last 50 at a big hardware store.
Yeah.
On council website.
$50 for 1,000.
On the compost, what do they call it?
Compost Revolution.
You
Yeah.
get a good discount.
Yeah.
Yeah, so lots of councils around Sydney or perhaps even Australia, but certainly the Eastern Suburbs councils. If you go to Compost Revolution, if you Google Compost Revolution, then there's a really big discount on compost bins, worm farms, and the purchase of worms.
So that's plastic, so that won't break down. We'll take that. I think that's what's left of a coffee bag, probably, that got put in that condition bag. All right, so we put our worms in, and you will notice they'll fairly quickly burrow down into that bedding to get away from the sunshine.
Look a bit comatose, doesn't it?
Yeah, a bit of shock. So what I would do is get some moist newspaper or moist hessian, and so you can see the saddle on that one. You can see
Yeah.
So what was that again?
It's sexually mature.
yeah, it's just the sign. So cover them over with some moist newspaper or moist hessian. This is a really key thing with your worm farm. They'll be so much happier living in underneath that newspaper than if you don't have the newspaper, even with the lid on. So moist newspaper, moist hessian. So
Normally you'd fill the whole base there.
often, well, yeah, if you use a full brick, you might do the whole layer. And then I would just leave them alone for about a week. You don't need to feed them. Just let them settle in, get to know each other.
No, you don't open it at all.
As long as that's fully closed. So this one should have coverage for these holes. So just don't do that because that's going to fail. But keep the lid on, keep it in, and just don't feed it. And then a week later, come out and they should be ready for food. Now, what I would feed them, hang on. This is probably not that. They don't necessarily like onions, or 4B mix for that matter. So let's see what we've got underneath. You may not feed them too much citrus. So they don't necessarily like citrus. Julian had a great description of things that you would avoid feeding your worms, which is?
Well, yeah, basically, because worms don't eat the food, they eat the bacteria that feeds off the food. So anything that's antimicrobial, anything that's going to kill bacteria is going to slow down your worm farm. So garlic, onions, citrus, all those things have some antimicrobial properties. The other thing also is dairy and meat. They just don't compost well.
Yeah.
Does fish compost?
I'm counting that as meat.
Okay.
Cucumber. They like cucumber.
Yeah.
The cucumber.
They love rock melon.
Yeah, rock.
Yeah, melons. They go nuts.
Yeah, bit of avocado. Some mint
They don't
in
like
there.
pineapple.
They don't like pineapple. Yeah, anything kind of acidic. Yeah. Peas. They like coffee grounds. They'll like.
One way that think about it is if worms are like your eyeball.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that right, feel might sting your eyeball.
Yeah.
No wonder they like cucumbers, huh?
Yeah, that's right. It's just like a spa for them. Yeah. Bit of lettuce, really nice. So just put a little bit. I would just put like a small handful at this stage, even if you start with 1,000 worms, and put the newspaper back over, put the lid back on, and leave them alone. Come back maybe a couple of days later and have a look. If there's still food there, that hasn't been eaten, put the lid back on and just leave them alone. So the rule of thumb with worm farms, particularly when they're starting out, is only give them enough food that they can consume in a couple of days. Okay, so if you put a mountain of food in there, and they're just not going to eat it or eat the byproduct of it quickly enough, what can happen?
Moldy.
Yeah, it gets moldy, it gets anaerobic, it gets smelly, you get all sorts of flying things happening. So that's when you get problems, when there's food sitting in there for too long not being broken down and eaten by the worms. So less is always more with worm farms. So just put a little bit in, check it. Eventually your worms will start to breed and they'll fill this thing up with worms. If all going well, apparently 20,000 worms will live in here.
Oh my God.
Worms eat about their own weight, again, in food every day. So the more worms you've got, the more food you can put in. So once it gets on a roll, you can really start upping the food and really start cranking through it. Diversity, diversity, diversity. Don't just put coffee in there. I don't know, or maybe the worms would love it, I don't know, but you know, they need diversity, okay? And not too much.
And they'll slow down in winter.
Yeah. So this time of year is perfect for worms. They're really going for it. They'll slow down in winter. Where do you put your worm farm? Just before we move on to compost, where would you put it? Yeah, under cover. You can have them outside if it's raining, but you need to make sure your tap is open, or I generally take the tap off altogether and just have the juice flowing out. If it rains and the tap's closed, it'll fill up and drown your worms. Somewhere, out of the heat.
How much water do you pour? Like, you say to pour water in?
Well, I don't.
That's
Some
really
people
moist,
do.
so it doesn't-
Yeah, there's so much moisture in your kitchen scraps. They shouldn't need any more moisture, provided your lid's on. There's no holes in it, and you've got a nice layer of wet newspaper or hessian on top. That you don't necessarily need to water. I know some people do. And then after a while, your worms will build up. You'll put your kitchen scraps in. You'll get, I haven't got any to show you, but this brown kind of liquid comes out of the bottom. You dilute it to weak tea, and you can use that as a soil stimulant, let's call it, on your garden. But the best stuff that you get, here's another type of worm farm. To be honest, I haven't seen a worm in here for years, but things break down. So it's a something farm, and it's really, it's working really well. But stuff you get out of your worm farm or your whatever farm is this dark, rich. Does anyone remember what? Oh, have we talked about? No, humus. Have we talked about humus? Can't believe I haven't talked about humus yet. So here we are, humus. Welcome to humus. So this is broken down organic matter. Okay, brilliant plant food, brilliant soil food.
So is that what you're calling the castings?
Yeah, worm castings. It's the same as compost. Is the same as stuff that's broken down by organisms in your soil. It's this dark, rich material, and it's great. You can just use that if you're growing in pots. And when we do potting up, and we talk about this, you can put this on top of your pots, put some mulch on the top of that, and you watch, plants will go nuts. I love it.
So no, this is humus, not hummus.
Yeah, if it was hummus, it'd be even better, but it's humus.
Steve, can I just ask, when I first learned about worm farms, we were told to always put a handful of potted mix every time we put these food in. No? Not necessarily. And the other thing is, when you get to the casting stage, I've always found it a nightmare with trying to separate the worms from their casting.
Yeah, so the best way to do that, get your castings, get a flat area, pile your castings on top of the flat area in a pile, like a pyramid, and start scraping away the castings. When you get to worms, they'll go sunshine and they'll head down. Then you can scrape a bit more off and the worms will head down. And you keep scraping and then you'll end up with this little pile of worms right in the middle and all the castings around the outside. Yeah.
So that's the idea of the 3 layers, right?
Yeah.
So they'll work their way up to the top layer, and the bottom layer shouldn't have worms in it. You've had worms?
I've had worms for about 20 years.
They rest in that.
We'll see.
Yeah. And
I'm
look,
willing to do.
if you put worms in your pots, fantastic. Yes.
Hi, Steve.
Hi.
I've watched your tutorials before. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I've done everything you've said, but my worms just eat the Hessian blanket.
They will.
I'm only putting a tiny bit of food in, and then if it goes moldy, I take it out, and I've tried variety, and they're that's all they're doing. I don't know what's wrong with them.
You just, I don't know, take the hessian away, maybe change it for a newspaper. Are they? Yeah, I don't know.
I bought them, you know, through, you know, what that company you said, and I can't get them to eat food.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
So I'll have another. I've ordered some more worms because I don't know, and I've kept them.
Opening up a dud batch. Yeah, look, keep trying. How old's your worm farm?
Oh, I got that batch. Oh, I've had many worm. The worm farm is old, but the batch got it in I don't know, March or April. So it's been for the winter. They're inside. They've got blankets. I look after them. I do it. I just.
Yeah, I don't know.
Very picky children. You know?
Yeah. Sing to them.
Anyhow, I'll have another go.
Yeah, keep trying. They'll. Yeah, I don't know. They'll eat it, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Sorry, no magic cure. Has anyone got a magic cure?
You have to know what food's going on.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't like it.
Yeah.
Like if it's bread or if it's something.
Yeah, I think too, there's always some mold or stuff on the hessian blanket. I think we shouldn't be too worried.
Yeah. Wouldn't worry too much about it. Keep an eye on them. Hopefully, eventually they'll eat the food. So we'll head over to the compost now, which is over here, and we'll go through that quickly.
So sorry, it's Miyako again. I saw the hungry bin there.
Yeah.
It's a sort of fancy bits of the, I guess, worm farm / compost bin. Does it work as how they advertise?
Sorry, I think
maybe she might have the answer.
Oh, okay.
Being too small or too wet, use shredded paper. Shredded paper,
yeah, might be too wet. Yeah, so that green one with the lid where we took the worm castings, that's another type of worm farm. It's not a stacking, layering type of one. So there's lots of ways you can do it. So I just want to quickly go through composting. So, you know, most of you may only have space. The beautiful thing about worm farms, they don't take any room or much room at all. So they're really suitable for a small space. I know people who actually use their worm farm as a coffee table. So you can have them inside, you can have them under your laundry bench. So if they're functioning and they're working well, they shouldn't smell and you shouldn't get any critters in them. So it's good incentive to really manage your worms well if you're drinking your cup of tea off them. So that's the benefit of those. If you've got a courtyard or a little bit of space, or if you've got a shared communal space at your block of units, maybe you want to start composting. There's different ways to compost. So there's a thing called fast compost. Well, there's fast composting, there's slow composting. Fast composting is where you get a container or a bin or a bay, something like this, and you collect a whole bunch of material and you layer it and you fill the whole bin. You put the lid on, you let it sit. A couple of weeks later, you turn it, and then you leave it for a week, and you keep turning it, leave it for a week, turn it, leave it for a week, and you're in about anywhere from sort of 6 to 12 weeks, you'll have a really nice little pile of compost. So you're really working it. Slow composting is where you just have a bin like this and you put stuff in when it's available and you put the lid on it, and you don't necessarily turn it so much. It's more just, it's a bit like a worm farm, but you just put things in and you'll just let the bacteria and the things do the work. So it's easier. It takes less time. It may take longer to get compost initially. Over time, I think slow composting, and I'll be really controversial here, is actually faster than fast composting because it's a living system. And if you just leave it alone, like most living systems, they function really well. So you've got bacteria and fungi. If you just stop messing with them, just feed them, they come up and they eat the stuff really quickly and turn it into humus really quickly. So, you know, I've got compost bins at home where literally we bring our little compost container. Some of it, I don't do worm farming anymore. It's just easier it's a compost for me, but some of this goes to the chickens and the rest of it just goes into the compost. That's, you smell that? That's get used to that smell. It actually smells like bean salad, but it's meant to smell like something else. So, and then I just put the lid on, kind of, sort of, but there's other things that I do. So that's fast and slow. The one, where do we go? Probably the most, I think the most important thing to remember with your composting is the mix of materials. So what I've just put in there, kitchen scraps, they might be in our category of what we call, or you can call them green, you can call them wet, you can call them nutrient rich. Let's call them green just for the, so your green nutrient rich materials, and then another category of materials would be your dry brown materials. So I got gloves on. So for every bucket full of green wet material, you want at least a bucket full, maybe even 2 bucketfuls of dry brown material. It could be newspaper, could be dried leaves, sticks, anything that's dry, brown and crackly, so carbon. Another way to look at it, nitrogen, carbon, whatever. So when you're doing a fast compost, you do it like a lasagna, where you have the sauce and then a layer of the pasta, and then sauce, and a bit of cheese maybe, but not cheese in the compost. So you get the idea. You layer the rich and the dry and the wet.
So you don't mix it up. You wait until you have a full layer to put the other.
Well, you can mix it up as you go, but yeah, it's So what I always do, I have a pile of, we've got bamboo plants at home. So I just collect the bamboo leaves, have a pile of them next to our compost bin. In goes the kitchen scraps, and just on top goes a layer of the dry brown material. And then the lid goes on, and that's all we do. Okay, and it seems to work quite well.
Put a little bit of soil in sometimes.
You could, yeah. You don't really need any soil. So to get another layer of sort of complexity, I guess, another way to look at it is there's this thing called the atom principle. So does anyone have you heard of the atom principle? And do you know what the
ATOM?
ADAM, as in Adam and Eve.
Aliveness?
Aliveness is the first A. So aliveness, we'll go. Diversity. so aliveness, compost bins, like your worm farm, it's a living system. So worm farms kind of rely more on worms. Compost bins are, worms, bacteria, fungi, countless organisms are going to live in here. So it's alive, it's a living thing that we need to keep alive. So there's aliveness. What does the D stand for? Diversity. Diversity, it's everywhere, right? So that means you want to put as much diversity into your compost as you possibly can. So, your kitchen scraps hopefully will naturally be fairly diverse, but if you just put nothing but orange peels in here, it's probably not going to compost down very well. So lots of diversity. The second A stands for air, yeah, aeration. So your compost needs air in it. So Bokashi has no air in it, so that's what we call anaerobic. Compost, compost is aerobic, so it's bacteria that needs air to break down. If you put nothing but kitchen scraps, has anyone had a compost bin where they did nothing but kitchen scraps?
My friend did. It just turned to sludge and junk like anything, and it was.
Yeah.
And I had to break it up with a
yeah, from a distance, right? Yeah. So it was
like shit.
So if you just put wet kitchen scraps in there, you won't have enough air. It will become anaerobic, a bit like your Bokashi, but unlike your Bokashi, it will stink. So stick your head in that and you'll know what the smell is like. So if you take the lid off your compost and it sort of hits you with that stinky rank smell, it's too wet. What could you do? You could add some dry brown crackly material and maybe mix it through. And by mixing it through, what are you adding as well?
Air.
Air. So you need to add air to the mix. You can fix it in 10 minutes, so it's not the end of the world. But the best way to fix it is to not have the problem in the first place. So that's where your wet-dry mix comes in handy. Okay.
Just for the Zoomers, what I showed you there was just an example of a no air compost that just reeks.
Yeah. So that smell is not good. And I think it's methane partly, so it's not good for the atmosphere as well. So you want to avoid that. So air, so aliveness, diversity, air, and moisture. So you do need to have moisture. So if you have too much dry, brown, crackly material, it'll probably be too dry. Has anyone had a compost bin that's too dry and just sort of brown, dry material? It basically will sit there for a very, very, very long time and do nothing. Sorry about the birds. Something exciting going on. So it's really a balancing act with composting. But I think you can make it work by just being careful what you put in the first place. If you got that balance of brown and green, then you're halfway there.
Will you say anything about pests, or that'll come in the pest section?
Pests? What sort of pests?
Ours is full of cockroaches.
Cockroaches. So what? Okay.
And the landlady shut it down because the neighbors complaining.
Oh man. So one of the things that can indicate that something's not quite right with your compost bin is cockroaches. So you take the lid off and there's heaps of cockroaches. Does anyone know what's out of balance if you got lots of cockroaches?
Too dry.
Yeah, too dry. Generally, if it's too dry, that's when you get cockroaches. Permaculture is all about, well, one of the principles of permaculture is a thing called relative location. So you put different elements of the system together so they work as a team. We have our compost bin in our chook run. So whenever we get cockroaches, we take the lid off and the chickens jump in and have a feast. So cockroaches aren't always a bad thing, but you don't necessarily want them in your compost bin. So that's an indication that it's too dry. So what could you do then if it's cockroaches? Put water in it, yeah, wet it, add more moisture, maybe turn it. Generally your cockroaches will go away when the conditions aren't good. The other thing is rats. One of the benefits of a hot compost where you're turning it is it's not a nice place to live and make babies when you're getting kind of turned over all the time. So just the more you work it, the less likely you'll have rodents living in your compost. Meat. Yeah, don't put. Yeah. So compost compared to worm farms, you can't put citrus or those things that you don't want in your eye. Compost you can. So compost is fine with onions and citrus and garlic, but again, best not to put meat in there. Best not to put dairy. They're probably yeah. And if you're really good at composting, you kind of can, but don't. Best not to. Bread, probably avoid bread as well. Yeah. So we give our meat, bread, and what was the other thing? Cheese, dairy to our chickens. They love it. They love it. And then we put the chicken poo in the compost. And that's brilliant for your compost as well. So Julian's got a rat or a rodent kind of mechanism. So it's very fine kind of mesh, and you can put this on the bottom, like underneath. I won't do it so that goes under the compost, and you fold that up the sides of the compost bin, and it just stops the rodents from digging in from underneath. It allows the worms and the critters to come up from the bottom.
Where can you get this?
Hardware store. You just cut it.
Yeah.
It's some sort of mesh. Right, thank you.
Okay, so compost. I don't know if we've got any finished compost here, but it should look a lot like the worm castings over there. It's dark, rich material. And the beautiful thing about compost, you can use it again on your pots. And the great thing about it is it's full of bacteria and fungi and organisms that you can put in your soil, and all those organisms will feed your plants for you, as well as all the nutrients and everything. So we're creating an organism farm as much as anything else. So we'll talk about that when we do potting up and making soil. I think is that next week. 1 week in the near future, we'll be talking about soil and soil's relationship with plants and your compost bin and your worm drill, and it's all a closed loop and it's all a wonderful, amazing thing. So just about time to wrap up for the Zoom guys. How many have we got? 16. Yeah. Does anyone have on Zoom? We're going to have to say goodbye shortly. Did you have any last questions or comments or anything you wanted to share about either Bokashi or worm farming or compost?
I just had a quick question. Thank you. This was really good. Is there a way to dig through without stabbing the worms?
Through your compost?
Yeah.
Not really. Have we got the turners?
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, healthy compost should have a lot of worms in it, but you could try one of these guys, which is a compost turner, I guess. It's like a corkscrew. So you just kind of screw it down into your mix. And I guess out of anything, I mean, if you're a worm, I don't know. Does anyone know of a way you can turn your compost without squishing worms? Yeah, I don't know.
We can share this with you all. Is what we do is we have a what we call a soil saver. That's a square box, a 3x3, which is the optimum dimensions for composting. And it's collapsible. What we do is we just we make sure that we don't get it too full, where we are not able to dislodge it and lift it up. We move the box to where we want the next destination to be able to be managing it, and then we slowly take a flat shovel and scoop along the bottom of the remains, and then we can go through and lift it up and sift out the worms, and we can actually go and collect some for the next opportunity to build another worm bin. So that's been helpful for us. You know, it's all about the construction and technique, and that's what we found to be useful, is keep it simple. But that seems to be working for us. It may not be easy for everyone to be able to lift the bin itself, but with you've got two folks, you can put that together and lift it up, and then you can actually see the layering and the decomposing material there. So that seems to be helpful for us. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And you could do that with this system as well. Just sort of pop the compost off. We got a couple more questions, or
maybe just ask from two people.
Can we ask two people on Zoom something that you recall, that you remember from today, and that has kind of stuck with you? First in, best dressed. I think we've got 30 seconds.
Not putting in bread. I didn't know that.
Well done. Not putting in bread. Yep. Okay, one more.
Wet and dry lasagna.
Yes. Wet and dry lasagna when you're setting up. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So that's the end of this session. Make sure you sign up, because there's another 6 weeks to go, or 7 weeks to go. Sign up to each Zoom session, and I'll be sending out a feedback form to you, and we really appreciate getting the feedback each week, even if you've attended previously. Cool. Oh, and on Tuesday, the 10th of November, we're doing a special workshop from the guys at Kua Coffee, and we're going to be showing how to go from crop to cup. So if you like your coffee, we're going to show you how to grow coffee, process it, end up with your cup of coffee at the end. So sign up for that. Yeah, you're there. Yeah, you'll have to Google at this particular point. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.
Thanks, see you.